Welcome, deep divers, to an exploration that, well, it might just turn your understanding of reality inside out. Today, we're diving into some fascinating sources. They all center around this really audacious claim.
A big one.
Yeah, that
Right.
your imagination isn't just for, daydreaming, it's actually the architect of your world.
That's right. We're talking about this profound principle, often summed up as imagining creates reality. And our sources today, well, they draw heavily from the uh, transformative teachings of Neville Goddard. It's this blend of, ancient wisdom with some really startling modern anecdotes.
Hmm.
It's a concept that, honestly, once you truly grasp it, it promises to radically shift how you approach, well, everything in your life.
So, our mission today is really to unpack this powerful idea. We want to show you not just what it means in theory, but maybe more importantly, how it has shown up in real people's lives.
Yeah, the actual results.
Exactly. From like unexpected money stuff to amazing healings, even these uncanny predictions. Get ready to maybe rethink everything you thought you knew about your own creative power. Understand the profound shift this knowledge really invites.
Okay, so let's unpack this core idea.
Yeah.
This audacious claim that imagining creates reality. Our sources tell us that the poet William Blake believed, I'm quoting here, man is all imagination, God is man and exists in us and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination, that is, God himself.
Wow.
Now, that's a pretty grand statement, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It's suggesting that life itself isn't just a series of external things happening to us,
Right.
but it's actually an activity of our own imagining. It's like an internal drama playing out.
An internal drama.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how these sources present this. It's not just like a philosophy or some poetic idea.
Not just nice work. No, they argue it's a demonstrable operational law. They say events happen because of what they call comparatively stable imaginal activities. And these events only continue as long as that internal support, that imagining, is there.
So if you're aware of what you're consistently imagining,
Then you're actually aware of what you're creating. It fundamentally shifts the idea of causation, away
Right.
from external stuff like luck or circumstance.
right, random chance.
And puts it entirely inside. It's a mental process, they argue, not primarily a physical one, that generates your reality.
Okay, so just to be clear, it's not just like fleeting thoughts passing through your head.
Oh, no.
It's your sustained inner world, your dominant imaginings that shape the outer. And the sources go even further. They state that objective reality is solely produced through imagination.
That's the core claim.
But here's the catch, and it's a big one, right? This incredible power, this ability to create reality, apparently often sleeps as though dead when we don't consciously use it.
hmm It's like having a superpower you've completely forgotten you possess.
Yeah. So the future then isn't some fixed path we're just passively walking down.
No, it's dynamic. It's an unfolding of our collective imaginal activity, what we as individuals and groups are imagining into being.
And this leads to some really important implications for how we live our lives.
Definitely. The sources warn against two ways we can misuse this power. One is pretty obvious: unrestrained, unlovely image making.
Yeah.
Basically, dwelling on negative or harmful thoughts, imagining the worst.
Right. Feeding the negativity.
Exactly. But the other one is more subtle and maybe more common: undue repression.
Repression. Okay, what does that mean in this context? Not just stuffing down desires.
It's more than that. It's about shutting down your imaginative faculty itself,
Mm.
denying its power, refusing to believe you can create. When you repress that inner imaginative life, you actually restrict the flow of new, wanted experiences into your world. It can lead to feeling stuck, stagnation.
Ah, I see. So it's about consciously choosing to believe in the power of your inner world over what seems like solid facts outside.
Precisely. Asserting the supremacy of your imaginal acts. Because trying to change external circumstances without first shifting your inner imagining,
Yeah.
the sources call it futile readjustment of surfaces.
Just rearranging deck chairs, basically.
Exactly, you're just moving furniture around. But the house itself, the foundation, is built on that same old imaginative blueprint. The real change has to happen in the blueprint, your inner world.
So if you really want something different in your life, the work isn't primarily out there, it's in here. You
Right?
have to transform your inner world first. That means imagining the wish fulfilled, getting totally immersed in that state.
And it's not just visualization, like seeing a picture. It's a deep emotional union with that desired state.
Yeah.
So much so that actually starts changing your behavior, your reactions, everything.
It requires what the sources call self-abandonment, which sounds intense, but they describe it as basically faith plus love.
hmm
Yeah.
Fully committing yourself mentally to your wish as if it's already done, letting go of the how it will happen.
Which is the hard part for many.
Absolutely. And just being in that end state, feeling it now.
Okay, this brings us to a really critical distinction they make about how imagination works.
Yes, there are two modes, essentially. Imagination can be conservative or transformative.
Conservative versus transformative.
Okay. Conservative imagination just builds from memory. It reinforces what already is. It basically recreates your past over and over.
Okay, keeps you in the same patterns.
Right. But transformative imagination, the really creative kind, builds from generous dreams of fancy. It envisions how things ought to be, moving beyond just what you've experienced before.
And they argue that the vividness of something you see right now, a present sense impression, isn't inherently more real than a memory or wish you hold vividly in mind. It's our imagination functioning in that present moment that makes it seem so objective.
So the trick then is to learn to function in your desired future state, imaginatively.
Rather than just thinking of it as something separate, off in the distance.
Exactly, thinking from it.
And to really make it transformative, you have to, as they say, enter into the image in your imagination and think from it.
Yes, that's what they call spiritual sensation.
Spiritual sensation, like engaging more than just sight in your mind.
Precisely. Think about it. Holding a rose in your mind and actually smelling the fragrance, feeling the texture of the petals mentally. If you can engage your senses like that, even if the thing isn't physically there, you're using spiritual sensation.
And this isn't just about making it vivid for fun. It's the radical act of living within that desired reality right now.
Allowing your inner world to shape the outer instead of waiting for the outer world to dictate how you feel inside.
That's where the real power is, according to these sources.
And they're very clear. Dreams aren't realized just by the rich or the powerful.
No.
They're realized by the imaginative. Because, simply put, and this is a key quote, if you change your imagining, you will change the facts.
Wow. Okay, so if the core principle is imagining creates reality, then the practical application is learning to dwell therein.
Exactly. Fully inhabiting the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
And it's a common human fault, isn't it? Our sources point this out. We engage in perpetual construction, deferred occupancy with our dreams.
Ah, I like that phrase. Explain that a bit.
It's like we're constantly designing our dream house in our minds, right? Adding rooms, picking colors, tinkering with the plans. But we never actually move in imaginatively. We never live there in our feeling. We keep deferring the experience.
And so we defer the manifestation. We keep it at arm's length.
Exactly. So the secret of people who dream things true, as they put it, is they know how to live in their dream until it actually shows up.
This controlled waking dream.
Yeah.
It allows us to essentially predetermine our future.
Think about it. If your imagination is you, fundamentally, then you must be where you are in imagination. You're not just confined to your physical body sitting here right now.
That ability to mentally move from how things seem to be to how you want them to be, how they ought to be, is described as one of the most important discoveries you can make about yourself, about your own creative power.
Okay, we have a great example of this from the sources, don't we?
We do. There's a story of a doctor and his wife. For 15 years, they just sort of dreamed about building an apartment on their lot.
15 years is a long time to dream.
It is. They had savings put away for security, but not enough for the actual building.
Right.
After learning this principle, they decided, okay, let's focus on the building without money.
Bold move.
Very. They mentally constructed it. They even drew physical plans, but always kept thinking from the end, imagining the completed occupied building. They lived in the feeling of it being totally done.
And the result of thinking from the end in this case was pretty astonishing.
It really was. A contractor, someone they only knew by name from seeing his signs around town,
Just a name.
just walked into their office one day, unannounced. He apparently said he didn't even know why he stopped, but he'd been wondering about their empty corner lot. And even after they explained, look, we have no money,
Right.
not even for proper plans, he was, and the source uses the word compelled.
Compel.
Seemingly compelled to figure out ways to make it happen. He found some existing blueprints that fit, which saved them architect fees. Then he found a finance company.
Okay.
And when there was still a gap in funding, he financed the rest himself, agreeing to be paid back from the net profits later.
That's unbelievable. So the building got completed and almost fully rented.
With basically no money down from the couple themselves. just pure orchestration based on their sustained imagining.
What an incredible story. And it wasn't just huge projects like that, right?
No, not at all. There's a story about a lady who wanted to sell her current home and find a very specific kind of new home.
Okay.
So she started to imaginatively sleep in the kind of home she desired. She had a very precise list.
Let's hear it. Specificity seems important.
Oh, yeah. She wanted an English-style house, 2 living rooms, separate apartments within it, a library, on a flat knoll with space for dogs.
Quite the list.
Wood paneling, a huge fireplace, a magnificent view, and seclusion. And all for a specific, quite low price.
What did the real estate agents say?
They basically told her it was entirely impossible. Some even apparently giggled at her list, given the price point.
I can imagine. But she persisted.
She insisted that such a house did exist because, as she put it, her imagination had already been sleeping in it.
Love that. So what happened?
After exhausting several real estate offices, one finally showed them a property up Kings Road that wasn't even officially listed.
Ah, the unlisted ones.
And guess what? It was a large 2-story redwood and brick English-style house, alone on its knoll, incredible view, a massive 28-foot-high living room with a great fireplace.
Wow.
An apartment downstairs, 2 staircases leading to separate bedrooms, and a second living room.
It ticked all the boxes, almost.
Almost. It was built on 2 acres, which initially seemed like too much taxable property for them.
Okay, so a potential hurdle. What was the turning point?
The turning point came when she stood on the dining room balcony. She looked down at her husband, standing by the fireplace below, and she imagined him saying, "Well, honey, how do you like our new home?"
Okay, creating the scene.
And she imagined herself replying, "I love it."
Yeah.
She held that feeling, really immersed herself in that state of ownership and love for the place until she fell asleep that night.
And then?
The very next day, the agent called. They had purchased the house. The owner had suddenly agreed to split the property, giving them the house and just 1 acre
Just what they needed.
for the exact price they had offered.
Incredible. It really shows it's not just wishing, is it? It's about making that desired reality so emotionally real inside you.
That the outer world just has to conform. It rearranges itself.
Okay, so the power of imagination isn't just about creating new things, bringing things into your life. It's also about changing what seems unchangeable, even apparently the past.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting. Our sources discuss how imagination can potentially turn the wheel backward through a process called revision.
Revision.
The claim is, well, it's audacious. What imagination makes, it can unmake. This isn't just the conservative imagination building from memory.
Right.
This is creatively transformative, actually altering something that seems already done, already fixed in being.
That's a truly profound idea, altering the past.
It is,
Yeah.
and the sources connect this to the biblical parable of the unjust steward. They suggest it points to a form of, quote, illegal imaginal practice, a mental falsification of the facts that's actually approved in the teaching.
Mentally falsifying facts. How does that work?
The idea is to destroy the causes of evil or negative outcomes by revising a past event in your mind, even one that seems really bad or unforgivable, and then, crucially, acting from that revised reality internally.
So you're consciously, mentally rewriting the script of your past to free yourself, or maybe others, from its negative impacts going forward.
Exactly. You're delivering yourself from those consequences forevermore, according to the teaching.
So how do you actually do it? You literally relive your day.
Yes, you relive parts of your day or specific past events as you wish they had happened.
Okay.
So if you got disappointing news, maybe in a letter or an email, you mentally rewrite that letter or email to contain the news you wanted to receive.
And you just read this revised version in your imagination.
Over and over until it feels completely natural. That feeling of naturalness, that's the absolute key.
And the sources say, pretty unequivocally, revision results in repeal.
Yes. The original event, the original negative impression, loses its power over your present and future reality. It's as if it never happened in its original form in terms of its effect on you.
Wow. Okay, we have an illustration of this too, right?
A really good one.
Yeah.
A person identified as FB received a negative reply from a real estate agent about selling some land. The letter listed all the reasons why sales were terrible right now.
Okay, standard negative feedback.
FB got this letter on a Tuesday. But in his imagination, he rewrote it. He mentally crafted a letter saying the agent was actually eager to take the listing. He read this revised, positive letter over and over in his mind. And then he added another imaginal scene. He saw himself shaking the agent's hand, saying, "Thank you, sir," and hearing the agent reply, "It was a pleasure doing business with you."
So he lived in that successful outcome. What happened?
3 days later, the actual agent called him. He had a deposit for the lot at FB's specified price.
No way.
Yes. The signing happened the very next day, and apparently the conversation played out word for word just as I had heard it in my imagination.
That's incredible. The imaginal act became so real, it just overwrote the previous facts.
Exactly. It superseded them.
And it's not just business deals, is it? It works for personal relationships, too.
Absolutely. There's a story of a listener, let's call her LSE. She met a man she really wanted to marry on a blind date, but then they lost contact.
Oh, no.
So she applied this teaching of revision, but kind of projecting it into the future she desired. Before sleep each night, she imagined herself in a different bed, in her own home, but as a married woman. She mentally twisted an imaginary wedding band on her finger, feeling the feeling and saying internally, "This is wonderful. I really am Mrs. J.E.," using his initials.
She lived in that fulfilled state every night.
She did for about a month. And then, a month later, he somehow found her again. He proposed in November. They were married the following May. And she reports being happier than she ever dreamed possible.
It really shows how personal and specific you can be with this.
It does. And the sources share an even more profound story of revision involving physical healing. A woman named LH.
What happened to her?
She had suffered from the crippling effects of an accident for 39 years. 39 years. It had cost her a small fortune in medical bills.
Wow, a lifetime of pain.
One night, she decided to really test herself and try to revise that ancient accident from her childhood.
Revising something from decades ago.
Yes. It apparently took her many nights before she could truly feel herself back in that childhood moment, but she persisted.
What was the scene she revised?
She imagined herself back on the swing where the accident happened. She felt the wind, then imagined jumping forward off the swing and landing solidly and easily on my feet. No fall, no injury.
Okay.
Then she imagined running to her mother, showing her she was fine. She repeated this imaginal act of landing perfectly until she fell asleep each night.
And the result?
Within 2 days, the pain she'd had for decades began to recede. Within 2 months, it was completely gone.
After 39 years.
Completely gone. A condition that had plagued her was simply no more.
That's almost miraculous. It really demonstrates the potential power of altering those deep-seated past impressions in your imagination.
It really does. It challenges our whole notion of fixed reality.
Okay, building on that, if imagining creates reality, then the sources argue something even more mind-bending, that there's actually no fiction.
Yeah, this one really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
If a purely imaginal activity, like writing a story, can produce a physical effect or predict an event,
Then our physical world must, in some fundamental way, be imaginal itself. Its substance is imagination.
so what we call fiction today.
The sources say becomes tomorrow's fact. It's as if creative writers, maybe even unconsciously, are shaping future events with their sustained imaginings.
That's a heavy responsibility if true.
It is. And they drive this point home with a really astonishing story. It's about Morgan Robertson's novel.
The one written years before the Titanic.
Exactly. Written 14 years before the actual event. The novel featured a massive ship called the Titan.
Titanic.
Pretty close.
Very close. And the similarities are uncanny. Both were huge ocean liners, similar tonnage, similar length. Both could carry about 3,000 people.
Okay.
Both tragically had far too few lifeboats. Both were hyped as being unsinkable or unshakable.
Chilling.
And the really eerie part. Both sank in the month of April on their maiden voyage from Southampton after striking an iceberg in the North Atlantic.
14 years apart, the fiction and the fact. Yes. This is presented as powerful evidence for the idea that causation is mental, not physical. That the drama of life originates in the imagination first.
And that our seemingly fictional creations aren't always just fiction. They can actually manifest as future reality.
It's quite a chilling thought, really. Makes you look at stories differently.
It's like imagination isn't just a passive mirror reflecting the world.
No, it's an active force. Like a scientist in a control room, as one source puts it, guiding events through space and time.
The writer Catherine Mansfield is quoted saying something relevant here.
Yes. Could we change our attitude? We should not only see life differently, but life itself would come to be different.
So a prophet, in this view, isn't someone predicting an inevitable future cast in stone?
No. More like a seer, who shows what can be built or what likely will be built based on persistent imaginal activities, either their own or the collective's.
It completely reframes how we think about possibility, destiny, all of that.
It really does. And we hear about this from EOL Jr., who was a dance instructor.
Okay, what was his story?
Well, initially, he was pretty skeptical about this whole idea. But he decided to accept the challenge. Imagine as if it creates reality.
What did he imagine?
He wanted to own an Arthur Murray dance franchise. But he lacked the funds, so it seemed pretty unlikely.
A common hurdle.
Yeah. So night after night, he imagined himself actually managing his own studio. He'd fall asleep feeling like he was already doing it. 3 weeks later, a friend called him out of the blue from Reno, offering him a partnership in a Murray studio there.
3 weeks? That's fast.
Pretty quick. And that experience, he said, was where he really began to understand how this law worked.
But he didn't stop there, did he?
No, he got ambitious. A year later, wanting more, he reread the source material and started a new nightly imaginal drama.
What was this one?
He imagined hearing his superior praising their Reno studio's success and suggesting he acquire a second studio.
Okay, visualizing the conversation.
Exactly. 3 weeks later, that exact scenario materialized, almost word for word, as he put it. He ended up getting the Reno studio all to himself, and his partner took a new one in Bakersfield.
So he was convinced by then.
Absolutely. And then he challenged a skeptical young teacher working for him. He boldly stated that their currently insignificant Reno studio would be the foremost topic of conversation at the upcoming National Dance Convention in 3 months.
Wow, that takes some real conviction to say out loud.
It really does. He then went home and imagined himself standing before a huge audience at the convention, speaking on the topic of creative imagining.
Didn't matter.
Totally. He felt the nervousness, the audience acceptance, heard the applause, and even visualized Mr. Arthur Murray himself coming forward afterward to shake his hand.
And did it happen?
It materialized down to the last detail. Everything he imagined played out.
What did the skeptical teacher say then?
Apparently, the teacher remained unconvinced, saying it all just happened too naturally.
Huh. Some people just won't see it, I guess.
It seems so. But for EOL Jr., it solidified his belief completely. And he continued using it, imagining owning the largest Arthur Murray dance studio in the world, which eventually led to him being offered a major studio in a city of 1.5 million people.
That continuous escalating manifestation, it really highlights the power of keeping that imaginal focus going, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Sustained imaginal activity produces sustained results.
It's clear from these stories that imagination seems to work through what our sources call subtle threads. It orchestrates events in ways we probably could never have devised logically.
Exactly. This section really drives home how consciously imagining the wish fulfilled seems to create the necessary circumstances and pull in all sorts of unexpected help.
Yeah, it's not always a straight line from A to B.
Not at all. We have the story of a gentleman who, after reading about revision, consistently practiced it daily. He'd been making about $600 a month. 2 years later, practicing revision and presumably other imaginal acts, he was able to stand before an audience and state that his income was now equal to that of the President of the United States.
Wow, quite a jump.
A huge jump. And hearing this inspired another man in the audience, TK, who was apparently broke at the time.
Okay, what did TK decide to do?
He decided to imagine himself winning the 510 pool at the Caliente racetrack. That's where you have to pick the winners in 6 different races.
A long shot, typically. How did he imagine it?
He imagined the end result. Sorting through his betting tickets, feeling certain he had all 6 winners, he vividly saw the cashier handing him a large sum of money, which he then imagined placing under his shirt for safekeeping.
He enacted that whole scene.
Nightly, for 3 weeks, falling asleep in the action, feeling the reality of it.
And when he actually went to the track...
Every detail of his imaginative play was realized, except for one small thing.
What was that?
The cashier gave him a check for $84,000 instead of actual cash.
Uh-huh. I think he could live with that difference.
I suspect so. The imagination clearly knew how to deliver the essence of the win.
And this win inspired someone else.
Yes. Another man in the audience heard TK's story and decided to duplicate the experience. A month later, he won $16,000 in another 510 pool.
Okay, so it wasn't just a one-off fluke.
But he still wanted to prove to himself it wasn't just an accident or coincidence, so he set a more complex imaginal goal.
What was that?
He imagined seeing large balances in his bank accounts, $10,000 in one, $15,000 in another. Then he imagined using a specific horse racing system that brought his total winnings up to exactly $11,533.
So he imagines specific numbers.
Yes, his total imaginative accounting added up to $36,533. He enacted this financial scene daily for less than a month.
All right, the suspense. What happened?
On March 2nd, he went back to Caliente. He filled out his betting tickets for the 510 pool. But then, as he described it, strangely enough, he duplicated 6 more tickets, exactly like the first 6.
Made identical bets twice.
Yes, and then he apparently made a mistake and copied 2 tickets again when making his 10th selection. So he had multiple identical tickets.
Sounds confusing, but maybe important.
Very important.
Yeah.
Because he ended up holding 2 winning 510 tickets, each paying $16,423.50. Plus, he had 6 consolation prize tickets.
And the total winning?
$36,788. Almost exactly the $36,533 he had imagined.
Whoa. And he mentions something else unusual happened.
Yes, he specifically noted that near the end, the trainer of one of the major winning horses in the sequence actually tried to scratch the horse to pull it from the race.
Which would have invalidated his winning tickets.
Exactly. But the race stewards denied the request, and the horse ran and won.
So this AJF story, as the sources call him, clearly illustrates how subtle were the threads.
Absolutely. His mistake in duplicating tickets, the steward's unusual refusal to scratch the horse, these weren't just random events.
They were orchestrated by the imaginal drama.
Precisely. Moving the plan forward to reach the specific goal he held in mind. The sources suggest that chance isn't really chance. It's just law not recognized. Wise imagining ensures the end.
Because man is always living in a world of imagination. And when you realize that,
The physical world is no longer the ultimate reality, and imagination is no longer just a fantasy or a dream.
this brings us nicely to visionary fancy, which our sources describe as spiritual sensation. We touched on this.
Yes, it's not just seeing with your physical eyes, but really engaging all your senses within your imagination.
To give that desired image, that scene, real vividness, a feeling of reality.
Because the images of our imagination, they argue, are the true realities. The physical manifestations are just the shadows or echoes of what we first conceive within.
We have a great example with FB again, searching for a specific opera recording.
Yes, Kirsten Flagstad's Complete Tristan and Isolde on record. His friend told him it hadn't been reissued, wasn't available. Even the salesman at the record shop said no.
So factually, it wasn't there.
Correct. But despite this, FB mentally rehearsed, walking into the record shop, asking the salesman, and clearly hearing the salesman reply, "Yes, I have that."
He created the scene he wanted.
He repeated this inner scene until it felt incredibly real in his mind, almost like it had already happened, like a memory.
And when he physically went to the store.
The salesman initially said exactly what he'd said before, "No, we haven't got it."
Oh.
But FB internally insisted, "That's not what I heard you say."
Yeah.
He held on to his imaginal reality. As he turned to leave, somewhat disappointed,
Yeah.
he happened to glance up and notice what looked like an advertisement for that very opera set on a high shelf.
An ad.
That's what it looked like.
Yeah.
When the salesman reached up to get it down, they discovered it wasn't an ad. It was the actual complete album, all 5 records.
Amazing. So the scene wasn't exactly as he imagined, but the result was identical.
Precisely. It confirms the idea that an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden it into fact. Your inner conviction, your inner hearing in this case, dictated the outcome.
And another powerful account involves Mrs. GR, who was being sued.
Yes, sued over a real estate commission after a house deal fell through. Her own attorney told her they had not the slightest chance to win. Things looked bleak. Her husband was in a hospital. She had no witnesses.
A tough spot. What did she do?
She turned to her imagination. In the courtroom, she deliberately disregarded all the negative statements being made. Instead, she intently listened in her imagination to the foreman of the jury saying the words, "We find the defendant not guilty."
She focused solely on the desired verdict.
She held on to those words, that inner hearing, throughout the entire deliberation process.
And when the jury returned,
The foreman stood up and said verbatim, "We find the defendant not guilty."
wow, she essentially locked up the jury in her imagination, as the source puts it.
Yes, showing her consciousness was powerfully shaping the outcome, even in a formal legal setting.
We also hear about R.O., whose maid did something terrible while she was away.
Yes. The maid apparently stole all her furniture while R.O. was in Europe. The police were called, private detectives hired, but for weeks, nothing was found.
A nightmare scenario. So R.O. used imagination.
She did, sitting in her hotel room, far away, She closed her eyes and imagined herself back in her own apartment. She sat in her favorite chair, looked at her piano, felt the familiar upholstery, just lived in that familiar space mentally.
Immersed herself in the feeling of being home with her things.
Exactly. The very next day, she said she mistakenly started walking towards her vacant apartment building, something she hadn't done. And as she neared it, she saw a pair of familiar ankles walking ahead. The maid's ankles.
Whoa.
The maid, seemingly compelled or startled, then led R.O. directly to the warehouse where all the stolen furniture was being stored.
Unbelievable. Her imagination literally found what the entire police force couldn't.
It's a testament to how that inner scene can guide outer action, even compelling the actions of others involved.
And then there's FG's story, which sounds almost like pure wish fulfillment.
It really does. She was hospitalized and used the recovery time to intensely daydream about a Caribbean cruise, something she absolutely could not afford.
Just daydreaming, or was it more focused?
It became very focused. She got travel brochures, she chose a specific ship, a specific stateroom, even picked out 7 ports she wanted to visit. For a solid week, she lived that entire experience in her imagination.
What did that feel like?
Walking the gangplank, feeling the sea spray, the tropical sun on her skin, smelling the salt air, full sensory immersion.
Okay. And then
She left the hospital and pretty much forgot all about it. Life went on. But 2 months later,
Yeah.
she received notification that she had won first prize in a contest she'd entered months before and forgotten about.
Don't tell me.
First prize was that very Caribbean cruise, on the specific ship she chose, in the exact stateroom number he had picked out, stopping at all 7 ports she had desired.
That is just uncanny.
It really proves the point the source makes. To travel is the privilege, not of the rich, but of the imaginative. It wasn't just idle wishing. She lived the experience mentally until it manifested physically.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. Our sources emphasize that our moods are incredibly important.
Yes, and not just as effects of our circumstances, but as powerful causes.
That's a radical shift, isn't it? We usually think, I feel happy because something good happened.
Right. But the principle here flips that entirely. It says, we shall achieve our goal because we have assumed the happy feeling of the wish fulfilled.
The feeling comes first and causes the goal's achievement.
Exactly. Moods are described as profound imaginal activities without which no creation is possible.
And there's a quote from Professor Ribot.
Yes, the sources quote him saying, an idea which is only an idea produces nothing and does nothing. It only acts if it is felt, if it is accompanied by an affective state. That feeling, that mood, is the crucial ingredient.
It's what gives your imagined scenes the power to create, like the vibrational frequency that attracts the matching reality.
Precisely. And we have a wonderful story about this, about TK, a woman in a really tough spot.
Tell us about her situation.
She was 55, out of a job, no family support nearby, no money, truly dire circumstances.
That sounds overwhelming. How did she apply this?
Initially, she tried imagining every single specific thing she needed, rent money, food, etc. But it just felt overwhelming, too much to juggle.
I can see that. So what did she do instead?
She heard about simplifying it, about capturing the general, overarching feeling of things being wonderful, just the mood itself.
A feeling of, isn't it wonderful?
Exactly that phrase. So as she fell asleep each night, she started repeating to herself, isn't it wonderful? Something marvelous is happening to me now. And she worked on feeling the way she would expect to feel if that were actually true.
Just focusing on the positive, grateful mood. How long did she do this?
She kept it up for 2 months. Then, completely out of the blue, a casual friend she hadn't seen in months was visiting New York. This friend happened to run into an old, wealthy friend of TK's family while in New York. And this wealthy friend, for no apparent reason, just suddenly decided he wanted to share a portion of his wealth.
Wow.
He sent TK a certified check for $2,500.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Ah.
And for the next 2 years, she received generous monthly checks from his attorney, covering all her needs, allowing her to get a car, a nice apartment, everything.
That's incredible. And it continued.
Yes. Eventually, she received legal papers guaranteeing this income for the rest of her natural life.
All stemming from cultivating that mood, that feeling of, isn't it wonderful?
It really shows the power of an unburdened, positive, grateful mood to open doors in ways you could never logically predict.
That's a truly amazing turnaround. We also hear from MB, whose daughter needed money urgently.
Yes, her daughter desperately needed $3,000. The daughter knew about her mother's understanding of these principles, so she refused offers of borrowed money.
She asked her mother to help in her way.
Exactly. Using imagination. So, MB and her daughter decided on an imaginal scene together.
What was the scene?
They focused on seeing money just flooding towards the daughter, but crucially, they held a feeling of joy for anyone concerned. No specific source, no specific path, just the feeling of abundance and joy flowing.
Focusing on the end state and the positive feeling.
Right. And apparently, the daughter's mood transformed almost immediately back to happy and confident, just from participating in that imaginal act with her mother.
And the result?
A few days later, MB's 91-year-old mother, who lived across the country and presumably knew nothing about the situation, called MB. And during the call, she suddenly announced she was giving MB a check for $3,000 made out directly to the daughter, plus another $1,500 for the grandchildren.
What was her reason?
She just said she'd suddenly decided she wanted to give cash gifts to loved ones while she was still alive to see them enjoy it.
Wow. And MB felt this was directly linked.
MB specifically noted that it wouldn't have happened anyway, not like this, emphasizing that the timing and manner felt directly connected to their imaginal act. The inner shift created the outer circumstance.
And there's a more playful story about warts.
Yes. A mother, JR, whose 10-year-old son had lots of large warts on his legs. She remembered an old wives' tale about buying warts to make them disappear.
Buying warts?
Yeah. So she decided to test the principle hidden within the folklore. She offered to pay her son a small sum for each wart. She gave him the money and told him very seriously, okay, I've got them now. They belong to me. You can't keep them anymore. They will disappear.
And the son believed her.
He was 10. He seemed to just accept it playfully. Within 10 days, the warts started to fade. Within a month, they were completely gone.
That's almost unbelievable. Did she try it on others?
She did, but the source notes it only worked with her son, who seemed to truly believe his imagination, or maybe his mother's combined with his belief was the cause. It highlights how belief can really amplify the imaginative act.
So embodying a mood or a belief, even playfully, can produce these profound results.
Exactly. As the sources put it, if you don't imagine yourself into the mood or the state,
he is ever free of the result.
Right. You're either consciously creating with your moods and imagination, or you're just reacting to what seems to be happening. There's no neutral ground.
Okay, this next concept is really out there. Through the looking glass.
Yeah, this pushes the boundaries even further.
The sources suggest that man, who is all imagination, is not tenant to the brain, but landlord. What does that mean?
It means we aren't fundamentally restricted by what our physical brain or senses tell us about reality. We're not trapped inside our heads looking out.
We're the landlord, not the tenant.
Exactly. We have the ability, they argue, to pass through our sense fixation, our attachment to what the senses report, into any imaginal structure which we conceive.
Like breaking free from a mental prison built by our senses.
Precisely. And this ability to move from perceptual awareness, things that they seem physically, to conceptual awareness, things as they ought to be, as vividly imagined, is described as possibly the most important discovery a person can make about themselves.
How do you make that shift?
You imagine as vividly and lifelike as possible what you would see, hear, touch, do if your wish were already physically true right now. And then you imaginatively participate in that scene, feel yourself actually there.
It's a deliberate, conscious act of shifting your sense of reality.
Yes. And we have a powerful story about this from VH.
What was her situation?
She was suffering from a very serious blood clot condition. It caused hardening of the arteries, arthritis, nerve damage, even an enlarged thyroid. She described her body feeling encased and bound by tight wires. She was essentially bedridden.
That sounds awful. How does she use imagination?
A friend sent her a postcard of a beautiful beach. Looking at it, VH started to remember happy summer days from her past, running free on the sand. She began to intensely live in this memory, this imaginal scene, feeling the wet sand under her feet again, the shock of icy water, hearing the waves crash. She immersed herself in that feeling of absolute freedom and health for about a week.
Just living in that beach scene mentally.
Yes. Then one morning, she was suddenly seized with excruciating pain all over her body.
Oh no, it sounds bad.
But then just as suddenly, she felt completely free. She said it was like all the wires binding her legs were instantly cut. The decade-long condition, the pain, the stiffness, it just vanished in that moment.
Vanished after all that time.
Completely vanished.
That's an incredible demonstration of what they mean by walking by faith, not by sight.
Exactly. When we walk by sight, we're bound by what our eyes tell us, the illness, the limitation. But by faith, by imagination. We order our lives according to scenes and actions only imagination can see.
It transforms imagination from just reflecting reality to actively building it, shows its supremacy over the physical facts.
Precisely. And the sources share another amazing story, this time involving JS and her brother.
What was happening with her brother?
He was facing a fourth major operation, and the doctors had given him very little hope of recovery. Things looked grim.
So JS decided to intervene imaginatively.
Yes. She asked herself, what does my brother truly desire? Not just recovery in the abstract, but what symbolizes normal life for him.
And what was it?
She realized he really wanted to get back to his life, to continue living in his body, and specifically, he'd been wanting to remodel his kitchen. That became the symbol.
Remodeling the kitchen as a sign of health and future.
Exactly. So she began to imagine him healthy, energetic, busily remodeling that kitchen. She focused on the feeling of joy and normalcy in that scene.
And then something strange happened.
Yes. Suddenly, while holding this imaginal scene, she found herself physically gripping a kitchen chair in her own home. And then, just as suddenly, she felt she was standing right beside her brother's hospital bed.
An out-of-body type experience.
It seems like it. She felt she clasped his well hand and heard him say, clear as day, I knew you would come, Joe.
Wow.
Then she heard herself reply, it's all better now. You know it. And then another distinct voice, seemingly external, said, remember this moment.
And the outcome for her brother.
The very next day, the doctors were baffled. They couldn't account for it, but scans showed no operation was necessary. He was released from the hospital shortly after.
And he recovered.
He went back to work and has apparently been perfectly well ever since. And yes, he did remodel his kitchen.
That's a remarkable illustration of how deeply our focused imagination can potentially impact others, even at a distance, even physically.
It really pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible. And this concept is taken even further with MLJ's story.
The one about imaginal travel.
Yes, she was sitting in her living room in San Francisco. She decided to imagine, really intensely, that she was actually in her daughter's living room over in London, England.
Okay, quite a distance.
She focused on surrounding herself completely with the specific details of that London room. The furniture, the way the light came in, everything.
And she succeeded.
So much so that she suddenly found herself actually standing in the London living room, visually. Her daughter, who was physically there, turned, saw her mother standing there, and looked absolutely startled and frightened.
The daughter saw her.
Apparently so. MLJ herself became emotionally upset by the daughter's reaction and immediately found herself snapped back to her living room in San Francisco.
Did she get confirmation?
5 days later, she received an airmail letter from her daughter. The letter was written on the very day of the experiment. In it, the daughter described having seen her mother standing in the living room, looking as real as if she were physically present, and admitted she had been very frightened by it.
And the timing matched.
The time of the visitation described in the letter exactly matched the time MLJ performed her imaginal action, accounting for the time difference between London and San Francisco.
That is just incredible. It really illustrates that idea. Man is all imagination. Therefore, a man must be where he is in imagination.
For his imagination is himself. It truly blurs the lines between mental presence and physical presence.
So, what does all this imply for our everyday interactions or relationships?
Well, the sources claim there's no existence out of mind or thought. Even our memory, which might be faulty, actually recreates people and situations in our present awareness.
Okay.
This means if there's room for improvement in any relationship or situation, we shouldn't just keep replaying the old negative memories or perceptions.
What should we do instead?
We should mentally reconstruct them. Visualize the person or situation filled with new positive content. See them as we would like them to be, rather than letting them carry the burden of our past negative imaginings about them.
This is the power of attitudes they talk about.
Exactly. It's not just how you feel in general, but how you specifically imagine others and situations to be. Your attitude toward them is a creative act.
And FB had an experience with this related to a panhandler.
Yes, a really telling story. Years before, when he was young and poor himself, he gave money to a panhandler, only to see the man staggering drunk later that day.
A disappointing experience.
Very. And it led FB to make a pledge never to give to a street beggar again. He kept that pledge for years, even though his conscience bothered him sometimes.
Okay.
Much later in life, financially secure now, he encountered another panhandler. He gave the man some money, but immediately felt that old regret and judgment flood back.
The old pattern. But this time he did something different.
This time, remembering the principle of revision and changing attitudes, he decided not to let that past negative experience define the present moment.
What did he do imaginatively?
He constructed a scene in his imagination where he heard this specific panhandler telling him sometime in the future, "Thank you, now I'm on my feet and have some self-respect again."
He imagined a positive outcome for the man.
Yes, and he persisted in holding that imaginal scene, hearing those words, for about 4 months whenever the memory arose.
And then?
Then, the actual man appeared before him again, in the flesh. But this time, the man came up to him specifically to tell him that he now had a steady job and had indeed gotten his self-respect back.
Wow. Directly confirming the imaginal scene.
Exactly. It shows that our imaginal activity should focus, as the source says, on not what the man was, but what he may become. It embodies forgiveness and transformation, not just for us, but potentially for others too.
It's truly changing your attitude about someone internally and seeing it reflected externally.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And JB's story about her mother-in-law illustrates this too.
What was the situation there?
The mother-in-law was apparently a lonely, rather embittered divorcee. She desperately wanted to remarry, but was convinced it was impossible for her. Her negativity was affecting the family.
Okay.
JB and her husband admitted they had secretly, perhaps unkindly, wished the mother-in-law would just move way out of town or even to China just to get away from the constant negativity.
A common feeling, perhaps, but not very constructive.
No. But then JB realized she needed to change her own attitude, her own imagining of her mother-in-law.
What did she imagine instead?
She started imagining her mother-in-law as a completely changed personality, happy, joyous, fulfilled, and secure in a wonderful new relationship.
Focusing on the positive transformation.
Yes. About 3 weeks later, the mother-in-law came to visit, bringing along a friend, a recently widowed gentleman about her own age.
Ah, a potential development.
Seeing this, JB refined her imaginal act. She started vividly visualizing her mother-in-law extending her left hand, admiring a beautiful ring on her ring finger.
Focusing on the symbol of engagement or marriage.
Exactly. 1 month after she started visualizing the ring was actually on her mother-in-law's finger. She was engaged.
Wow.
2 weeks after that, she was married.
That's amazing. And the China part?
Well, true to JB's earlier, maybe slightly mischievous wish, the mother-in-law and her new husband bought a lovely new home, way out of town. And because the new husband apparently disliked the long drive for frequent visits, JB Riley noted she might as well have moved to China.
Be careful what you wish for, even half-jokingly. But it shows how subtly our imaginings can shape reality, influencing others' paths in unexpected ways.
It really highlights the difference between just resisting something unwanted, like the negativity, which often just keeps it alive,
Right.
and actively deciding to change it by shifting your inner imagining about it, which creates a new reality.
As the sources say, nothing is real beyond the imaginative patterns we make of it.
Exactly. And Arcade learned this lesson too, regarding a friend who owed him a lot of money.
What was happening there?
The friend had borrowed a substantial sum, but kept falling behind on the payments. Arcade really needed the money back, but remembered the teaching warning against robbing others of their ability by applying pressure or imagining negatively about them.
So instead of calling lawyers or getting angry,
Right. Instead of applying external pressure, Arcade constructed an imaginal scene for 3 consecutive nights.
what did he imagine?
He heard his friend telling him enthusiastically that unexpected orders had flooded his desk so rapidly he was now able to pay the loan back in full. He focused on the friend's success and relief. On the 4th day, the friend called him. The friend excitedly explained that by what he called a miracle, he had suddenly received so many large unexpected orders that he had just mailed RK a check for the entire amount due, plus interest.
Another direct hit. It shows our attitudes, shaped by imagination, can literally transform the perceived abilities and circumstances of others.
It seems so. It's not just about manipulating our own reality, but potentially uplifting others through our positive assumptions about them.
Okay, let's talk about all trivia. This principle suggests size doesn't matter when it comes to imagination.
Exactly. The sources state clearly, general knowledge is remote knowledge. It is in particulars that wisdom consists, and happiness too. Meaning the underlying mechanism of creation through imagination doesn't care if you're trying to manifest $1 million, heal a major illness, or find a parking spot, or say a specific hat. The perceived bigness or smallness is irrelevant to the process itself.
So the universe doesn't differentiate between big things and trivia.
Not according to this teaching. What does matter is the clarity and focus of your imaginal image, having a distinct, sharp, and wiry bounding line, as Blake might put it, being definite.
Be specific and clear, no matter the scale.
Precisely. And GL's story illustrates this perfectly. She apparently had everything she needed materially, but wanted to test her imagination purely for getting things.
Just as an experiment, what did she choose?
She didn't even need a hat, but she selected a picture of a specific, quite unique hat from a fashion magazine. She cut it out and stuck it on her mirror.
Okay.
She studied the picture, then closed her eyes, mentally put that hat on her own head, and imagined herself wearing it confidently as she walked out of her house, just feeling it on.
How many times did she do this?
Just once, apparently, but with complete focus and conviction.
And what happened?
The very next week, she was at a luncheon, and a friend across the table was wearing the exact hat from the picture.
Whoa. Did she say anything?
Before she could, the day after the luncheon, GL received a special delivery parcel. Inside was the hat.
No. Who sent it?
The friend from the luncheon. The friend included a note saying she didn't particularly care for the hat herself after buying it, but she thought it would look wonderful on GL.
That's amazing. It demonstrates that movement from dream to thing happens even for seeming trifles if the imagining is clear.
It really underscores that the mechanism is the same, regardless of the desired scale. Clarity and feeling are key.
And here's another truly amazing one involving AA and a painting.
Yes, this one's remarkable. AA and her husband had just finished building their dream home on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Beautiful setting, but their bank account was completely empty.
House rich, cash poor.
Exactly. They desperately wanted a specific type of picture for a large blank wall in their living room.
What kind of picture?
A wild seascape, dominated by a great white clipper ship under full sail. Very specific vision, but absolutely no money to buy art.
So what did AA do?
Sometime later, she was browsing in an art gallery and saw the exact painting she'd envisioned. The perfect size, the clipper ship, the stormy sea.
She found it. But the price.
Astronomical.
Yeah.
Way, way beyond their means.
So logically impossible. But she kept seeing on her wall.
She still saw that picture hanging on her living room wall in her imagination. That night, she told her husband about finding it, but he just reminded her, gently, they couldn't afford any picture right now.
Reality check.
But the very next day, her husband had to keep a business appointment he really didn't want to go to. He dragged himself there.
Okay.
And in his client's office, hanging on the wall, was the identical painting. Same ship, same sea, same size.
What? In the client's office?
Yes. And during the meeting, the client gave the husband a down payment check for some work, but the check was $10 short of the agreed amount.
Okay.
Instead of correcting the check, the client pointed to the painting and said, "Tell you what, take that painting instead of the extra $10. I'm redecorating anyway. Don't really want it."
He offered the painting for $10.
Essentially, yes. And later, the husband found out there had been an error in his own calculations. He actually wasn't owed that extra $10 at all.
So they got their exact dream painting for free.
For absolutely nothing. It's like the universe conspired in the most ingenious, unexpected way to deliver on her clearly held imaginal vision.
That just defies logical explanation. And for a seemingly smaller but equally precise example, RL and the bread.
Yes. A bus strike was on, and RL had been shopping all day. She was exhausted and didn't want to walk the extra blocks to the store just for a loaf of bread.
Understandable.
So standing at the bus stop, she just stood still for a moment and, as she put it, allowed a vision of bread to dance in her head. She specifically focused on the exact brand she always liked.
Just a quick mental image of her favorite bread.
Yes. Then she got on the crowded bus. As she went to sit down, she almost sat on a paper bag left on the seat. Naturally curious, she peeked inside. There's a loaf of bread, the exact same brand she always buys, and had just pictured in her mind, untouched.
Left on the bus seat. That's incredible, too.
These trifles, as the sources call them, were produced without price, without any physical effort beyond the clear, focused imagining.
It really reinforces that the how is not our business.
Not at all. Clarity of the end result seems to be the key.
Okay, this leads us to the concept of the moment.
Yes, the sources assert that the moment is absolutely critical. It's when the spiritual man's work is done.
What does that mean, the work is done?
It refers to that single creative instant when you successfully assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. In that moment, the imaginal act is complete, and the world begins to subtly mold itself to conform to that new inner pattern.
So the creation happens in that moment of successful imagining.
That's the idea. The sources contrast this with Satan, who isn't portrayed as some active evil force,
No.
but more as a symbol of the reactor, the state of mind that only reacts to circumstances, that only recreates what already is, based on sensory evidence. It just perpetuates the status quo.
Whereas the spiritual man, the conscious imaginer,
Acts. Initiates change from within, regardless of outward appearances.
and the motto for this is, the moment is now.
Exactly. Anything you want to do, any state you want to embody, you can do it at once in your imagination. Now.
It's not just a catchy phrase, it's the realization that the instant you truly feel your wish fulfilled, the creative act is finished.
Yes. The physical manifestation, the unfolding in time, then becomes the inevitable consequence, the echo of that internal shift you made in that moment.
It shows how quickly reality can respond when the imagination is truly aligned and convinced.
Because, as the sources constantly reiterate, nothing stands between man and the fulfillment of his dream but facts. And facts are the creations of imagining.
So if man changes his imagining, he will change the facts.
Yeah.
Instantly, in principle.
Precisely. And we have a truly remarkable story from JRB that seems to illustrate this almost instantaneous creation.
What happened?
She was driving her car. She saw an elderly lady dressed all in gray, just missed catching her bus. The lady looked quite agitated and hurried toward a nearby phone booth. JRB felt a pang of sympathy and thought, oh, I wish I could have offered her a ride.
A passing thought.
But immediately following that thought, a complete mental drama played out in her mind very quickly. She imagined pulling over, opening her car door, and the smiling, relieved lady in gray stepping in.
She imagined helping her.
Yes. She heard the imaginary lady thank her profusely, explaining she was late meeting friends and worried they'd leave. In the mental scene, JRB dropped her off, and the lady saw her friends still waiting.
How long did this mental movie take?
Apparently, it unfolded in her mind over the time it took her to drive about one city block. Very fast.
Okay, just a quick internal scene, then what?
Just 4 blocks farther down the road, JRB stopped at a red light. Suddenly, someone tapped urgently on her closed car window.
Who was it?
It was a lovely elderly lady with gray hair, dressed all in gray, looking out of breath. She asked JRB for a ride because she had just missed her bus and was desperate to meet her friends before they left.
No! The exact scenario.
The exact scenario. JRB gave her the ride, dropped her off a few blocks later, and the real lady looked towards the corner and exclaimed with relief, "Oh, good. They're still waiting for me."
That is uncanny. It's like her brief imaginal act just collapsed space and time.
JRB herself recognized in that moment that she had just witnessed her own waking dream take form in physical action almost instantaneously and with startling consistency.
Wow. Just wow.
And finally, there's GB's profound experience. This one speaks to the deepest level of imagining creates reality, recognizing imagination's oneness with the ultimate creative power with God.
What happened to her?
One day, while just walking down the street, she was suddenly confronted by a frightening, cursing man who was brandishing a cane aggressively towards her.
A dangerous situation.
Potentially, yes. But instead of reacting with fear, her immediate thought was, now I can truly test what I profess to believe.
Test her belief.
Yes. She thought, if I truly believe we are all one, the Father, this derelict man, then no harm can possibly come to me. She held on to that feeling of oneness, that faith.
Yeah.
She described feeling a sense of light envelop her. Instantly, the man stopped yelling, lowered his cane, and just walked past her quietly. The threat completely dissolved.
Her inner state changed the outer event.
It seemed so. And this immediate successful test of faith made everything around her feel intensely alive, more real. But it didn't end there.
What else happened?
Later, she had a distinct mystical vision. The perfect luminous face of a child appeared before her inner eye, glowing with light, and a voice spoke saying, no, this is you.
This is you, identifying her with that divine image.
That's how she interpreted it.
Huh.
A profound realization of her own true, imaginative divine nature. She said the experience changed her forever. It points to the ultimate truth these sources suggest. Your imagination isn't just a part of you.
It is, in essence, you, the creative force of your world.
Exactly, your very being.
So after exploring all these incredible stories and principles, what does this all mean for you, the listener? Well, if imagining creates reality is true, even partially, then your inner world, Your thoughts and feelings are far more potent, far more determinative than any outward circumstance you currently face.
Mm-hmm.
You genuinely have the conscious power to sculpt your future. Not tomorrow, not next week, but right here, right now, by choosing what you focus on inwardly.
And this raises a really important question for all of us, doesn't it? Are you primarily reacting to life as it seems to appear on the surface?
Just going with the flow, pushed around by events.
Or are you actively, deliberately, consciously creating it from within? The stories we've shared today, from the woman who literally imagined her perfect, impossible house into being,
Yeah.
to the dance instructor whose imagined success became reality step by step, or the man who revised a crippling accident right out of his past.
Amazing story.
They all point to the same profound truth. Your imagination isn't just some fleeting mental activity you engage in sometimes. It is your very being. It's your direct link to the creative power that shapes all of existence.
And here's the truly transformative insight, the real game changer. If the world truly is imaginal in nature, if, as the Bible says, what is seen was made out of things which do not appear,
Then every single moment becomes an opportunity, a creative moment.
exactly, you have the power right now to step into the feeling of your wish already fulfilled, to enter into that imaginal scene until it gains that sensory vividness, until it feels completely natural, like home.
The challenge, of course, and the real invitation here is to consistently apply this knowledge, day in, day out.
To train your imagination like you'd train any other powerful faculty, like a muscle.
And just consider those words again from the sources.
Okay.
If you change your imagining, you will change the facts. Think about that. This isn't presented as just a nice philosophy to ponder. It's put forward as a demonstrable, applicable law of the universe,
Like gravity, almost.
in a sense. And what's truly fascinating when you look at all these accounts together is the sheer consistency. Across vastly different people, different backgrounds, different desires,
Big things, small things.
exactly, all pointing to the same underlying mechanism of imaginative creation.
So your imagination is definitely not passive. It's active. It's the potter, as one source puts it, and the world is the clay. You have the inherent ability to reshape circumstances, to refashion your life, to rewrite your past through revision, redefine your present through your assumptions, and actually predetermine your future through focused, feeling-toned imagining.
So maybe for your own next deep dive, your own personal exploration after listening to this,
Ask yourself this question. What would truly happen if I dared to imagine better than the best I currently know? What if I did that consistently every single day?
the answer, as our sources strongly suggest, might just surprise you. It might just change everything.